For Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the journey ended not with a bang, but with a whisper of irrelevance. While she managed to keep her seat by the narrowest of margins, she returned to a Washington that no longer feared her tweets or cared about her viral moments. The media cameras that once followed her every move had turned their lenses toward the new wave of leaders, people like Maria Santos, who were busy actually passing legislation and solving problems. AOC became a living monument to a failed experiment, a warning to future generations that a political career built on sand cannot withstand the tide of truth. She had built a brand, but she had failed to build a legacy, and in the world of real power, that is the ultimate defeat. If you believe that this shift back to common-sense leadership is exactly what our country needs, then please make your voice heard by commenting "Builders Lead" below and subscribing to this channel right now. We are committed to tracking this new era of accountability and ensuring that the performers never regain their grip on our government. Your subscription is your vote for a more honest and effective America. The true legacy of J.D. Vance's speech was the empowerment of the silent builder. Small business owners, nurses, veterans, and tradespeople began to see themselves as the rightful heirs to the American political tradition. They realized that their experience in the real world, meeting a payroll, raising a family, serving in uniform, was a far better qualification for office than a degree in performance art. A new generation of leaders emerged from the factory floors and the hospital wards, carrying the "What did you build?" standard into city halls and state legislatures across the land. They weren't looking for followers. They were looking for results. Vice President Vance himself saw his vision for an economically populist Republican Party become the new center of gravity in American politics. By focusing on the tangible needs of the working class, energy independence, job security, and the dignity of labor, he managed to unite a coalition that crossed traditional party lines. He proved that you don't need to be a radical to be a revolutionary. You just need to be authentic. His question had become the definitive test for any public servant, a constant reminder that the government belongs to the people who build the country, not the people who perform for it. As we look toward the future, the message is clear. The American people have rediscovered the value of the past tense. They are no longer interested in what a politician would do or might advocate for. They want to know what they did. The "What did you build?" movement has created a permanent culture of accountability that will haunt every poser and every grifter for years to come. It has reminded us that the strength of our nation lies in our hands and our hearts, not in our social media feeds. The builders are back, and they are here to stay. Thank you for being part of this incredible deep dive into the turning point of our time. If you want to stay updated on how the new generation of builders is fixing what the performers broke, please hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it with every patriot you know. Comment below with your own story of what you are building today. Let's show the world that the American spirit of creation is stronger than ever. Together, we will continue to demand builders in government and reject the performers who have held us back for too long. In the hallowed halls of the United States Senate, where the ghosts of statesmen past still linger in the shadows, a moment of reckoning just unfolded that will be talked about for generations. If you are tired of the polished lies and the Instagram influencers masquerading as leaders, you cannot afford to turn away from this screen. Stay with me until the very end, because I'm going to show you exactly how the facade of the radical left finally crumbled under the weight of one simple, devastating question. You will see the precise moment when the performance stopped and the cold, hard truth took over the room. This is the confrontation that every hard-working American has been waiting for, and the answer or lack thereof will change how you look at Washington forever. Vice President J.D. Vance stood at the podium with the quiet confidence of a man who has looked death and poverty in the face and didn't blink. He didn't need to shout, and he didn't need the theatrical hand gestures we see from the other side of the aisle every single day. He looked across the chamber at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who sat there draped in designer clothes, her hair perfectly coiffed for the next viral clip. She was ready for a social media battle, but Vance was there for a soul-searching autopsy of her entire career. He held the floor not to defend a policy, but to demand an accounting for a lifetime of empty promises. It was a formal speech, etched into the congressional record, ensuring that history would remember the day the working class finally spoke back. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke the life out of the room as Vance leaned into the microphone. He spoke with that unmistakable Ohio cadence, a voice forged in the fires of Middletown and tempered by the discipline of the Marine Corps. This wasn't the speech of a career politician who grew up in the suburbs of Virginia. This was the voice of a man who fought his way out of a cycle of addiction and despair. He looked Ocasio-Cortez dead in the eye and laid down the gauntlet with a phrase that is now echoing through every factory and farmhouse in this country. What did you build, Congresswoman? The question didn't just hang in the air, it demanded a sacrifice. Vance began by stripping away the layers of his own life, laying his cards on the table for all to see. He talked about a childhood where chaos wasn't a headline, it was a roommate. He spoke of a mother lost to the darkness of addiction and a home where the basic necessities of life were treated like luxuries. For J.D. Vance, wondering if the lights would turn on in the morning wasn't a talking point for a stump speech. It was a Tuesday. He built a life from the wreckage of the Rust Belt, clawing his way to the top through sheer grit and the GI Bill. He reminded the chamber that while some were sipping lattes and tweeting about revolutions, he was wearing a uniform in the sands of Iraq. He learned about sacrifice by serving a cause greater than himself, not by staging photo shoots at a fence. He built an education at Ohio State while working security shifts, refusing to ask for a handout or a bailout. He made it to Yale Law not because of a silver spoon, but because he outworked everyone else in the room. He built businesses that actually signed the front of checks, understanding the heavy weight of meeting a payroll. If you believe that America needs more builders and fewer performers, then you are in the right place. So please take a moment to comment your thoughts below and subscribe to this channel for more unfiltered truth. We are just getting started on this journey, and your support helps us keep the fire burning against the radical elite. Vance then turned the heat toward the woman sitting 3 rows back, the darling of the socialist left. He pulled out the receipts, the real ones, the ones the mainstream media tries to bury under a mountain of praise. He pointed out the staggering hypocrisy of a woman who claims to be the voice of the Bronx, but grew up in the leafy, wealthy suburbs of Yorktown Heights. While her father was an architect making a comfortable living, Vance's father was a ghost in his own life. While she was attending a $70,000 a year private university, Vance was earning his way through the ranks. The vice president laid bare the ultimate deception. The Bronx origin story was nothing more than a carefully crafted marketing campaign. He described how she moved to the city not for community, but for a brand, workshopping a narrative to run for Congress. It was a performance designed to trick working people into thinking she was one of them while she prepared to schmooze with billionaires at the Met Gala. He held up the photos of that infamous night, the $30,000 ticket, the designer dress emblazoned with "Tax the Rich," while she laughed with the very people she claimed to despise. It was the ultimate display of champagne socialism, and Vance wasn't letting her off the hook. He hammered home the point that she had built an Instagram following of millions, but her legislative record was a desert of nothingness. 7 years in the halls of power, and not a single significant piece of legislation to her name. She had built a brand, yes, but she hadn't built a single job, a single business, or a single solution for the family she claims to represent. He called her out for being a brand manager in a legislator's seat, someone who treats the American people like props in her personal movie. The contrast was devastating. the Marine who built a life versus the influencer who built a lie. The speech then shifted to the physical destruction she had caused, specifically the 25,000 jobs she killed when she chased Amazon out of New York. Vance didn't just use numbers. He brought the victims of her ignorance into the gallery to stand as living witnesses. He introduced Sarah Martinez, a single mother who had worked her fingers to the bone to get a degree in computer science. Sarah was in line for a six-figure job at the new headquarters, a job that would have changed her children's lives forever. But Ocasio-Cortez killed that dream because she didn't understand the difference between a tax incentive and a pile of cash. Vance even used props to drive the lesson home, bringing buckets into the Senate to explain basic economics to a woman with an economics degree. He showed how you cannot pour from an empty bucket, proving that the money she claimed she would spend on teachers never existed because the jobs were never created. He stood there, a vice president teaching a congresswoman the fundamentals of reality, and the silence from her side of the aisle was deafening. He made it clear that her performance had real-world consequences for real people who don't have a blue checkmark next to their name. The evidence was mounting, and the tension was reaching a breaking point as the witnesses in the gallery looked down with eyes full of resentment. They weren't actors. They were Americans who had their futures snatched away by a tweet. Every word Vance spoke was a hammer blow to the ivory tower she had built for herself. He was showing the world that when you elect a performer, you get a show, but you don't get a future. What did you build? Question was no longer just a query. It was a verdict on a failed ideology. This is the kind of accountability we need to see every single day in our government. And if you agree, make sure to comment "I stand with builders" and subscribe to this channel so we can reach more patriots like you. Your engagement is the only way we bypass the gatekeepers of the media. Vance then moved into the realm of the Green New Deal, which he described as a fantasy written by someone who has never turned a wrench or balanced a budget. He called it a college freshman's wish list that would dismantle the very backbone of the American economy. He didn't just critique the policy. He brought in Marcus Johnson, an auto worker from Michigan who has spent over 2 decades building engines. Marcus stood there, a man whose hands are calloused from real work, and told the room that Ocasio-Cortez's plan would render his entire life's work obsolete. He spoke for the millions of mechanics, truckers, and miners who are tired of being told to sacrifice their livelihoods for someone else's Instagram activism. The vice president pointed out the cruelty of a politician living in a luxury apartment telling a coal miner in West Virginia that his town has to die for the sake of a slogan. He highlighted the technical impossibility of her goals, bringing in expert testimony to show that her green utopia would lead to rolling blackouts and economic collapse. It was a takedown of the slogan over substance era of politics. Vance was defending the builders of our infrastructure against the vandals of our economy, and he was doing it with the precision of a surgeon. He reminded everyone that the radical left loves to talk about the people, while simultaneously treating them with utter contempt. They want to redesign the world from a first-class airplane seat, never stopping to think about the people who actually have to live in the world they create. Vance's voice grew colder as he spoke about the people unwilling to work, who would be subsidized by the very men and women Ocasio-Cortez was trying to fire. It was a moral argument as much as an economic one, and it resonated through the heart of the country. As we look toward the future of this great nation, we have to decide if we want to be led by those who create or those who destroy. If you want to be part of the movement that holds these performers accountable, please hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below to let us know you're still in the fight. We are documenting the fall of the radical elite, and we want you with us every step of the way. The silence in the Senate chamber was no longer just a pause. It was a heavy, suffocating weight that stripped away the glamour of modern progressivism. Vice President J.D. Vance had moved from the abstract failure of policies to the concrete failure of character. He stood there, not as a politician searching for a soundbite, but as a prosecutor of a failed ideology. He looked at the woman who had built an entire career on the word socialist and decided it was time to define what that word actually costs in the real world. He pulled out a new set of records, documents that didn't come from a social media feed, but from the blood-stained ledgers of history. Vance didn't just talk about theory. He talked about the cold, hard reality of what happens when people like Ocasio-Cortez get exactly what they want. He invoked the ghost of Venezuela, a nation that was once the crown jewel of South America, blessed with more oil than almost anywhere on Earth. He showed how the exact same promises of wealth redistribution and government control led to a country where parents are forced to scavenge for food while their leaders live in fortified luxury. He made the connection that the media refuses to make. The policies she tweets about from a designer couch are the same policies that have ended in starvation, tyranny, and poverty in over 40 countries. He anticipated her inevitable deflection about Nordic socialism and shut it down before she could even open her mouth. He cited the Prime Minister of Denmark directly, reminding the chamber that those countries are market economies, not socialist experiments. They succeed because they have free markets and property rights, everything the radical left in America is currently trying to dismantle. It was a masterclass in intellectual honesty, a quality that has been missing from the Senate for far too long. Vance was stripping the socialist brand of its trendy Instagram-friendly paint and showing the rusted, dangerous machinery underneath. As we watch this absolute dismantling of a fake narrative, it's clear that the truth is our greatest weapon against those who want to transform America into something unrecognizable. If you value this kind of deep dive into the facts that the mainstream networks ignore, please comment "Truth Matters" below and subscribe to our channel right now. We need your help to make sure this message reaches every corner of this great land. The vice president then pivoted to the most glaring contradiction of all: the lifestyle of the people's representative. He placed photos of Ocasio-Cortez's daily life side by side with the lives of the people she claims to defend. He showed her at high-end restaurants where an appetizer costs more than a working family's weekly grocery budget. He showed her in designer outfits that cost more than a month's salary for a retail worker. He wasn't just pointing out that she was wealthy. He was pointing out that she was a champagne socialist who lives like a capitalist while preaching against the very system that funds her luxury. To make this point undeniable, he called Patricia Williams to the stand, a mother of two who works 60 hours a week across 2 jobs just to keep her head above water. Patricia's testimony was a lightning bolt of reality that struck the heart of the chamber. She spoke about her 10-year-old car and her struggle to pay rent, while the woman who claims to be her champion attends $35,000 gala events. Patricia didn't ask for a government program. She asked for the 25,000 jobs that Ocasio-Cortez had killed in a fit of economic illiteracy. It was the ultimate indictment, a real worker confronting a professional performer. Vance didn't stop there. He moved into the sheer, unadulterated vanity of her legislative career. He held up the number 0, the number of bills she had successfully passed in 7 years. He compared her time spent on social media, photo ops, and late-night talk shows with the time she spent in committee hearings and serving her constituents. He brought in Mr. Rodriguez, a small business owner from her own district, who had been ignored by her office for months while she was busy being a global celebrity. The message was clear: she doesn't serve the Bronx. She uses the Bronx to serve herself. He showed the analytics of her viral posts, proving that she is an influencer who happens to sit in Congress, not a legislator who uses social media. She has built an empire of followers, but she has built a desert of results for the American people. While J.D. Vance was in the private sector, helping companies grow and create actual paychecks, she was workshopping her next tweet. While he was serving in the Marines, she was learning how to play a character for the cameras. The contrast wasn't just political. It was a fundamental difference in how one views the responsibility of leadership. This is the moment where the influencer-in-chief finally met someone who knows what it means to actually do the work. If you are as fed up as we are with politicians who care more about their likes than your livelihood, hit that subscribe button immediately. Tell us in the comments what you think a real leader should be building for our country. We are building a community of patriots here, and we want your voice to be the loudest. The vice president then addressed the growing rift within her own party, showing that even the Democrats can no longer stomach her performance. He read statements from party leaders who have distanced themselves from her radical fantasies. He showed how her own squad has fractured, leaving her isolated and toxic. He pointed out that she has become a liability to the very movement she claims to lead, a person who chooses purity and performance over actually helping the family she was elected to serve. She had built a brand so extreme that it even burned the hands of those who tried to help her. Then came the final, crushing moment. Vance walked away from the podium and stood directly in front of her, closing the distance between the builder and the performer. For the seventh and final time, he asked the question that had become a national anthem. "What did you build, Congresswoman?" The silence that followed lasted 30 seconds, half a minute of absolute, undeniable vacuum. She looked at her notes. She looked at the cameras. She looked for a way out, but there were no exits left. She had nothing to show for her time in power, but a collection of hashtags and a wardrobe of designer clothes. Vance delivered the verdict with the cold precision of a man who knows the value of a day's work. He told her that she had built a fake origin story, a fraudulent brand, and a career of destruction. He told her she was a brand manager, not a public servant, and an exploiter of the working class, not their representative. He ended by reminding the world that America was built by people who work, create, and sacrifice, not by people who perform for likes while others suffer. The Marine had delivered a final report, and the socialist had no rebuttal because the truth is impossible to argue with. The impact was immediate and global. Within 48 hours, the speech became the most watched congressional moment in history, racking up hundreds of millions of views. The question, "What did you build?" became a litmus test for every politician in the country. Working families across America began posting their own stories, showing the houses they built, the businesses they started, and the children they raised. They reclaimed the word builder from the elites who had tried to redefine it. The movement wasn't just about J.D. Vance. It was about a nation tired of being lectured by people who have never built a thing in their lives. As we wrap up this historic account, remember that the power to change this country is in your hands every time you demand accountability from those in Washington. If you found this video powerful, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment, "I am a builder," to show your support for real American values. We will keep bringing you the stories that matter, the confrontations that define our era, and the truth that the establishment is too afraid to tell. The echoes of that silence in the Senate chamber did not simply fade away. They transformed into a thunderous roar that swept across the heartland of America. We are witnessing the birth of a new political era, one where the shiny veneer of celebrity status is no longer enough to protect the politician from the scrutiny of the people they claim to serve. If you have ever felt that your hard work was being dismissed by those in power, you need to watch this next chapter very closely. By the end of this segment, you will see how a single question managed to dismantle a multi-million-dollar brand and ignite a grassroots firestorm that is currently reshaping the 2026 midterms. The era of the performer is ending, and the era of the builder has begun. Within hours of Vice President Vance's speech, the digital landscape of the country was permanently altered. This wasn't just a viral clip. It was a cultural reckoning. The question, "What did you build, Congresswoman?" became the new standard for political accountability. On every street corner from Ohio to Florida, and in every digital form, Americans began to demand answers. T-shirts, bumper stickers, and yard signs appeared almost overnight, all bearing that same haunting inquiry. It was a simple, elegant test of leadership that the radical left was completely unprepared to pass. But the most powerful response didn't come from political pundits. It came from the men and women who actually make this country run. Construction workers uploaded videos from the top of skyscrapers, pointing to the steel and glass and saying, "I built this." Small business owners showed their storefronts and their employee rosters, declaring, "I built this." Farmers in their fields and veterans with their medals all joined the chorus, creating a massive wave of authenticity that crashed against the fake working-class persona of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They saw through the Met Gala dresses and the Instagram live streams, recognizing at last that their representative was a stranger to the very concept of labor. If you are one of those proud Americans who has spent a lifetime building something real, then this channel is for you. So please comment, "I am a builder," and subscribe now to join our growing community of patriots. Your support ensures that the voices of real workers are never silenced by the social media elites again. The political fallout was just as devastating as the cultural one. Even the mainstream media, which had spent years acting as AOC's personal public relations firm, found it impossible to ignore the crater left by Vance's interrogation. When Jake Tapper and Chuck Todd admit that a Republican's speech was devastating and effective, you know the narrative has shifted beyond repair. The attempt by some networks to paint her as a victim only made the public angrier. Working families flooded the comment sections of every major news site, reminding the elites that destroying 25,000 jobs is not activism. It is a failure of leadership. In the halls of the Capitol, the silence from the Democratic leadership was a death knell for AOC's influence. Nancy Pelosi's cold statement about legislative effectiveness was a clear signal that the party was done protecting a celebrity who couldn't deliver results. Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, once seen as her mentors or allies, suddenly had nothing to say when her name was mentioned. The squad itself, the vanguard of the radical left, began to fracture under the pressure. Members who had once stood shoulder to shoulder with her in every photo shoot were now releasing vague statements about policy focus, desperate to avoid being dragged down by her sinking brand. The most poetic justice, however, started brewing right back in her own district. The people of the Bronx and Queens, tired of being used as a backdrop for a suburban New Yorker's political ambitions, began to look for an alternative. Primary challengers emerged who didn't come from elite universities or designer boutiques, but from the actual streets of New York. Maria Santos, a nurse with 15 years of service, became the face of this local rebellion. Her campaign wasn't built on hashtags. It was built on the trust she had earned in the community. When she stood in her scrubs and called out AOC as a performer, the entire district felt the shift. As we witness the total collapse of the socialist brand in America, it is more important than ever to stay informed with the facts the media refuses to cover. Please take a second to subscribe to this channel and share your thoughts in the comments about why the squad is finally falling apart. We are the only place for the unfiltered truth about the fight for the soul of our nation. The numbers told a story of absolute rejection. AOC's approval ratings in her own district plummeted, and nationally, the Democratic Socialist brand became synonymous with economic incompetence. Voters in the 2026 primaries began to favor candidates who talked about tax bases and job creation over those who talked about farting cows and eliminating fossil fuels. The 2026 midterms were no longer a typical election. They were a referendum on the very idea of a celebrity politician. Republicans and moderate Democrats alike ran on the "What did you build?" platform, and the results were a landslide victory for the builders. 46 House seats flipped as the American people sent a clear message to Washington. The squad was decimated, reduced to a mere shadow of its former self. AOC herself barely survived her primary, but she returned to a Congress where she had no power, no committee seats, and no respect. She was left with her millions of followers, but they were a hollow army. Every time she posted a photo or a tweet, the top response was always the same. What did you build? She had become a ghost in the machine, a warning to any future politician who thinks a viral moment is the same thing as a legacy. For J.D. Vance, the journey had come full circle. He had stood up for the people he grew up with, and they responded with record-breaking support. His 84% approval rating among working-class voters proved that authenticity is the only currency that matters in the long run. The movement that J.D. Vance ignited wasn't just about winning an argument on the Senate floor. It was about reclaiming the dignity of work in an age of digital vanity. As we move into this final phase of our deep dive, you are going to see how the "What did you build?" test became the ultimate filter for the 2026 elections. Stay with us because the conclusion of this saga contains a powerful lesson about the future of our republic that you won't hear anywhere else. You will see how the American people finally decided that a paycheck in the hand is worth more than 1,000 viral tweets in the cloud. This is the moment the silent majority stopped being silent and started being active. The collapse of the Green New Deal was perhaps the most significant victory for common sense in recent memory. For years, the radical left had used this aspirational document to threaten the livelihoods of millions. But when Vance brought in experts like Jennifer Martinez to explain that these slogans would lead to rolling blackouts and economic ruin, the fantasy finally hit the wall of reality. People like Marcus Johnson and Robert Miller became national heroes, representing the millions of Americans whose jobs were being treated as collateral damage for a social media aesthetic. They weren't against the environment. They were against a suicide pact disguised as a policy. The "What did you build?" test forced every politician to look at the men and women in the gallery, the ones who actually keep the lights on and justify their existence. When the Auto Workers Union and the coal miners finally turned their backs on the performers, the political map of the United States was redrawn. It turns out that when you ask a man to sacrifice his family's dinner for your Instagram engagement, he's going to say no every single time. The radical left had forgotten that America is a country of builders, not a country of professional victims. If you are proud to be a part of the backbone of this country, then we need your help to spread this message of accountability. So please comment, "I Build America," and subscribe to this channel right now. We are dedicated to honoring the workers and exposing the posers, but we can't do it without your support. The aftermath for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was a slow slide into political irrelevance. Stripped of her committees and ignored by her own party, she was reduced to the one thing she actually built: an echo chamber. Every time she tried to launch a new movement, she was met with photos of the Amazon families whose lives she had disrupted. The ghost of those 25,000 jobs followed her everywhere, a permanent reminder that economic ignorance has a human cost. She had become a cautionary tale, a warning that you can't feed a family with a tax-the-rich dress. In the 2026 midterms, the Champagne Socialists found that the working class no longer wanted their advocacy. Voters chose leaders who understood that building a bridge requires more than a clever hashtag. The era of performance politics was replaced by a new era of results-oriented governance. People like Maria Santos in the Bronx proved that you can be from the community and actually work for the community without becoming a national celebrity. The focus shifted from what a politician said on a screen to what they actually accomplished in the real world. J.D. Vance's legacy was cemented not by his title, but by the question he dared to ask. He reminded us that the American dream isn't about what you take or what you perform. It's about what you create. He showed that a kid from a drug-torn home in Ohio could build a life, a career, and a future through hard work and discipline. He stood as a living bridge between the struggles of the past and the opportunities of the future. By the time he walked off that Senate floor, he had changed the requirements for leadership in this country forever. As we reach the conclusion of this journey, it's clear that the builders are finally back in charge of the American narrative. If you want to continue supporting the return of common sense and the dignity of work, please subscribe, like this video, and comment below with your own story of what you have built for your family or your community. We will continue to hold the line against the performers and stand tall with the builders of the American dream. The final verdict on the era of performance politics was not delivered by a judge or a panel of experts, but by the American voter in the historic elections of 2026. If you have stayed with us through this entire journey, you are now equipped with the truth that the mainstream media tried so desperately to bury. We are about to witness the final transition of power from the influencers back to the builders, and the lessons we've learned will serve as a roadmap for the future of our great republic. This is the conclusion of the most significant political shift in modern history, and it ends with a message of hope for every citizen who believes that action should always speak louder than words. The stage is set for a new American century, built on the solid ground of reality. The 2026 midterms became a graveyard for the squad and the radical ideologies they championed. Across the country, candidates who ran on the "What did you build?" platform saw a groundswell of support that the pollsters never saw coming. It wasn't just a Republican victory. It was a victory for anyone who valued competence over charisma. In districts that had been blue for decades, working-class voters walked away from the Democratic Socialist brand, realizing that a politician's Instagram engagement doesn't put food on the table or keep a local factory open. The era of the celebrity legislator was officially declared dead, buried under a mountain of ballots from people who were tired of being treated like an audience instead of a constituency.